What an utter disaster for Donald Trump. You have to love it. You have to love it. His number one mission in life is to build up his own ego and to attack anyone who challenges what he perceives to be his supremacy over everything, right? He is a malignant narcissist, constantly looking for affirmation. And the ability to go out and crush his enemies is necessary for him to feel good about himself. And so, what I know with some certainty is that yesterday was a very bad day for Donald Trump on many fronts. So let's start with the most important breaking news, which is Tish James completely humiliated him because, or let's say the grand jury, the third grand jury to bring this case, humiliated Donald Trump because they could not indict her. Now, this headline, the third failure to get a grand jury to indict her, well, technically speaking, the first grand jury did indict her, but it was thrown out. It wasn't a real indictment, so that doesn't count because Lindsay Halligan was not a real U.S. attorney. And so they tried it again last week at failure. And they tried it again yesterday, the new guy stepping in for her. Not the new U.S. attorney, but they brought someone in from out of state, and he was acting in a lower capacity. He could not get an indictment. So 3 failures. The first, because she wasn't a real prosecutor, didn't have the authority. And the second and third, because the case is bullshit. Now, remember, in a grand jury room, the defendant is not present. The defendant's lawyer is not present. The prosecution puts on its evidence and its witnesses. And normally speaking, up until this administration, a grand jury would indict a ham sandwich. That is the joke. But they are so incompetent in the Trump administration that quite literally the grand jury would not indict the sandwich guy for a felony. And the only way they were able to bring that case was as a misdemeanor, and they even lost the trial. And now, the third time, they cannot get an indictment. Tish James is one of Donald Trump's biggest enemies. And the irony here, or maybe it's not ironic, maybe the causality here, is that Tish James had gotten that multi-$100 million, I forgot the exact number, judgment. It was a civil case against Donald Trump for fraud. And she was able to secure a massive judgment against him. It was over $450 million when that initial penalty was imposed. Now, later, the penalty was cut down, but let's just face it, it was close to $500 million penalty in connection with fraud, and it was related to bank fraud. Bank fraud because Donald Trump was lying about the value of his assets and in connection with getting a mortgage. And Donald Trump, I've got to tell you, in this fraud case, he was claiming that the square footage of his penthouse was 30,000 square feet. Now, I know you might think, well, maybe that's how big his penthouse was, 30,000 square feet. But actually, the square footage of his penthouse was 11,000 square feet. 11,000. Bald-faced lie. But there was more, of course, in this case. And actually, this was brought at the state level. But in like footnote 2 of the original civil complaint, which I read in detail when it came out, in that footnote 2 or footnote 3, it was like right at the beginning, Tish James had referred to 2 federal statutes that were implicated and noted that maybe the federal prosecutors might want to look into this. Okay, but they didn't, because Merrick Garland was in charge, is probably why. But anyway, we shall continue. So the deep irony here is Donald Trump has been angry at her, and then he decides he will go after her for the same kind of offense he committed, but yet she didn't, right? Remember, he's trying to claim that when she bought a second home, and said that it was going to be, a primary resident, not primary residence, but, that it wasn't going to be a rental. He's claiming she rented it out when in fact, all she did was let her niece live there. I mean, this stuff is such bullshit. And you might remember that Paul Manafort, who he pardoned, who was all tied up in ties to Russia and the Russian interference in the run-up to the 2016 election, who has long ties to Russia and to pro-Russian leaders in Ukraine and may have owed them a lot of money. One of the charges against Paul Manafort, for which he was pardoned after he was convicted, involved Paul Manafort getting some building or some apartment, buying one in New York City, that he was claiming would be a primary residence, not a rental, and him actually using it as an Airbnb. This helped him get a better mortgage rate. So if you think Donald Trump is tough on mortgage fraud, he's not. This was an invented case to go after an enemy. And I could not be more thrilled about it. So I want to share with you, because I want to celebrate this, what it looked like when the news broke. Let's go ahead and play that now, from that clip from MS Now, so you can hear it. And here we go.
Well, we've got some breaking news we want to get to. A grand jury has decided once again not to indict New York Attorney General Letitia James on allegations she engaged in mortgage fraud. Let's bring in MS Now senior investigative reporter Carol Leonnig. Carol, this is the third time. It is not a charm. Not a charm.
Yeah, it is not a charm, Katie. This is the third time the Justice Department, at the direction of the President of the United States, has tried to indict Letitia James, one of his perceived enemies, the person who accused him successfully of a serial effort to defraud banks and lenders. This is the third time that Department of Justice leadership has tried to indict James, and now the second time it has failed. The first time they were able to indict James when Lindsay Halligan came into office sometime after September 20th. I think it was November 4th. That indictment was dismissed on the argument that Lindsay Halligan, the U.S. attorney installed by Donald Trump, had never been legally appointed to that job and did not have the authority to prosecute anyone. That office has kind of ignored that judicial decision that Halligan is inappropriately appointed to that job. She remains in that position. And now a third time, an attempt to indict Letitia James has failed.
Can they try again, Lisa? Lisa Rubin is also joining us.
They could try again, but I am not aware of an attempt to indict somebody a fourth time that works, other than in the Sidney Reed case. Sidney Reed is one of the protesters during the National Guard's sort of role in D.C. Sidney Reed is a protester who was indicted. My understanding or my recollection is that it took 4 tries before she was actually indicted. So it's not clear to any of us that they're going to stop trying. And of course, this comes at a time where the president is trying to elevate Lindsay Halligan's nomination. You know, Carol and I have been talking about Lindsay Halligan in her role as the interim U.S.
Okay, so you get this idea here. And just so you know, what Lisa Rubin continued to say is Trump is trying to actually get Lindsey Halligan into the position the right way, which would be through Senate confirmation hearings. And it is really quite shocking that they are trying this again. Now, because I want to gloat a little more on behalf of Tish James, I'd like to share with you some of the headlines that we have seen. Let me get this a bit bigger. So here we have Washington Post. A grand jury again declines to re-indict Letitia James. How about this? I'm sorry, this was not the Washington Post. I think this might have been the Times. Now we have the Washington Post. Administration fails again to indict New York Attorney General Letitia James. The first one was Politico. Now we have yet another. DOJ fails again to re-indict Letitia James. Then we have from the Contrarian, updated, Tish James prosecutors should quit while they're behind. And then, of course, I wanted to know what was going on out there in the world. So I looked at El Mundo from España, and it says, El Departamento de Justicia no logra volver a acusar a Letitia James por segunda vez. Now, here, people, there's a bit of a confusion. Segunda vez would mean second time. So technically speaking, the first indictment, it was an indictment, even though it was thrown out. And then there are two more. Third time is not a charm. It adds up to 3 for me. Now, I got some other stuff happening that made yesterday a really terrible day for Donald Trump. And that is out of Indiana. Now, you know that Donald Trump is hell-bent, obviously, on trying to hold down to the slim majority the Republicans have in the House. Of course, he would like a larger majority. So he has embarked on this redistricting plan. And it's gone well for him in some states. We saw that the Supreme Court just approved of the state of Texas using race to gerrymander the congressional districts to make them Republican and non-inclusive and racially suppressive, which should be against the Voting Rights Act. But, you know, John Roberts has been on a mission for decades since the Shelby County case to gut the Voting Rights Act. So in Indiana, the Indiana legislature was voting on whether to go through the Trump ordered to them, the Trump desired redistricting plan. And you know what happened? They stood up to him because the states and the Republicans at the state level don't want a king. They may be our only hope. And the expert on Indiana is the former mayor of South Bend and our former transportation secretary, Mayor Pete Buttigieg. And here he is. I got 2 clips for you from the Chris Hayes show. Let's listen to Pete.
I don't know Indiana state politics that well. I really don't. It's not. There are states that I've had occasion to kind of cover in depth, and Indiana's not one of them. So I'm looking at this from the outside and thinking, wow, I did not see this coming. Now, there was resistance all along, and they were getting cajoled. What's your read on why this happened today?
It's absolutely extraordinary. You know, the vice president said they have to pick a side, and they did. Now, to be clear, they didn't stop being Republicans. This is a conservative state. These are conservative legislators, but they figured out that the right thing to do, and for them, the smart thing to do, was to say no to the White House, no to Donald Trump, and no to J.D. Vance. And having spent a fair amount of time around the Indiana legislature, I got to tell you just how intense this pressure might have been. These are not full-time legislators. At least last time I checked, they don't even have a full-time staff member. They often share a legislative aide. So imagine having a day job, being a part-time legislator, and you get a phone call from the President of the United States. You get an in-person visit from the Vice President of the United States. You got the Speaker of the House in Washington working the phones. That pressure is enormous, and they said no. It's an extraordinary thing.
It is. And, you know, if you are not from Indiana, and Stephanie is, and she just told us we are not a red state. We've just been gerrymandered to death here. Thank you, Stephanie. But if you're not from Indiana, there's still a lesson here that should buoy us, that should make us lift us and give us hope. And Pete offered that to Chris last night as well. Let's play it.
Was aligned with the president, tried to stage a rally, trying to show popular support for what they were doing. It fell flat. They could only get a few dozen. And I think that's especially important at a time like this where a lot of people at home are wondering if they have any power at all. A big part of how Trumpism works is to make you feel totally disempowered, to make him feel inevitable. And yet the clear takeaway from this is he is not unstoppable, and you are not without power. A whole bunch of people stood up, rallied in the State House, made those phone calls, the exact kind of old-fashioned political organizing things that some of us asked, does this still matter? Does this still work? It clearly had an effect, stiffening the spines of these Indiana Senate Republicans who, in the end, had this vote, and it wasn't even close.
And part
wasn't even close. Not only should this make us feel good about local political organizing, but it should make us feel good about our shared humanity. We need to build these connections and to push back against authoritarianism because the bad day yesterday for Donald Trump was just met with further, slamming his fist against the desk. I guess I shouldn't use my right hand because his was also lumpy and covered in Band-Aids because according to Carolyn Levitt, he shakes hands all the time because, everyone who shakes hands has a bruised hand with a Band-Aid on it. It couldn't be that he's constantly getting IV medication for some unknown, undisclosed medical condition. No, couldn't be that. But what we saw yesterday was him acting more like a dictator. He is doing things by executive order, like he wants to order the states by executive order, not how it works, to preempt any local legislation that would hinder AI. I'm speaking very generally. That's not how things work. But he's also looking around, right? Because this is his ego. He looks around and sees who are the most powerful men in the world. And one of the most powerful people in the world is President Xi of China. They have a very different system of government in China. That's not our system, but that's what Donald Trump wants. And I'm going to show you a clip of him at the White House, kind of trying to convince, this is his new thing, he wouldn't say it in these words, but let me speak like a human, that it is a comparative advantage for China to have a dictatorship, and that the only way the US is going to survive in the world up against China is if we have one too. Okay, sure. I don't see the world as a massive competition. I haven't been to mainland China. I've been to Hong Kong. Do I like the way the Chinese government cracks down on dissidents? Absolutely not. Do I like the way the US government cracks down on dissidents? I do not. I will not deny the shared humanity of the people across the globe or ignore the fact that we are stronger together. And I don't like repressive authoritarian regimes. I don't. But there's a difference between the people in power, even if that is embedded throughout society, and the rest of us. But still, Donald sees the world that way. And let me play it for you. Yet again, a moment where he is talking about having imperial power.
I believe there'll only be one country that really benefits, and it should be the United States, and it will be if we do this, if we're unified. We have to be unified. China is unified because they have one vote. That's President Xi. He says do it, and that's the end of that. We have a different system, but we have a system that's good, but we only have a system that's good if it's smart. David Sachs, can you say a few words, please?
You see, he backs away. Oh, we have a good system, but only if it's smart, right? He wants to be unified. Unity, the way our system works, is supposed to be through the representative democracy that we have, not through the one voice coming from Donald Trump and his billionaire benefactors. What drives Donald Trump isn't what's good for all of us. It's what's good for him, for his ego, for his pocketbook, and for his sense of power. He wants everyone to say how amazing he is, how they love him. And they say that to him when he gives them money and power. So let's go on. I got something else. I got Crazy Town in a moment. But before we get to that, we're going to have a little bit of a shorter show. I want to share with you Kristi Noem, because I didn't share with you from her hearing before a House committee. And I want to, this is kind of absolutely incredible. So let's go. I'm not even going to tell you what this is about, but we have a congressman named Ira Magaziner asking our secretary of Department of Homeland Security some questions. You got to love it.
How many United States military veterans have you deported?
Sir, we have not deported U.S. citizens or military veterans.
I don't believe you served in the military. I haven't either.
Hold on one second. I saw some in the chat. You're absolutely right. She did leave early, right? Because she couldn't handle the heat or she had some other meeting. Who knows? I'm going to play this at the beginning straight through. It's crazy good.
How many United States military veterans have you deported?
Sir, we have not deported U.S. citizens or military veterans.
I don't believe you served in the military. I haven't either, but I think you and I can agree that as Americans, we owe everything to those who have served our country in uniform, particularly those who have served in combat. Do you agree with that?
Sir, I believe that people that are in this United States that are citizens have legal status here.
Madam Secretary, we are joined on Zoom by a gentleman named Se-Jun Park. He is a United States Army combat veteran who was shot twice while serving our country in Panama in 1989. Like many veterans, he struggled with PTSD and substance abuse after his service. He was arrested in the 1990s for some minor drug offenses, nothing serious. He never hurt anyone besides himself, and he's been clean and sober for 14 years. He is a combat veteran, a Purple Heart recipient. He has sacrificed more for this country than most people ever have. Earlier this year, you deported him to Korea, a country he hasn't lived in since he was 7 years old. Will you join me in thanking Mr. Park for his service to our country?
Sir, I'm grateful for every single person that has served our country and follows our laws.
Can you please tell Mr. Park why you deported him?
Every one of them needs to be enforced.
But you understand that many veterans struggle with PTSD, many veterans struggle with substance abuse challenges. This man took 2 bullets for our country. You have broad authority, by the way, as secretary, to issue humanitarian parole, to do deferred action. Will you commit to at least looking at Mr. Park's case to see if you can help him find a pathway back to this country that he sacrificed so much for?
I will absolutely look at his case, but I want you.
And he's not the only combat veteran. She is in over her skis, as Jason put it. She's a devil woman. Resign. I think that's quite succinct, Jason. 100%. And she is the same as Donald Trump. Now, I got one more thing before Crazy Town. We also had another hearing that I want to share with you, and there was an FBI leader, a guy named Michael Glasheen, who is a high up in the FBI in national security. And so we had him at this hearing, and I will also just play it cold for you, and we'll talk on the other side.
Water domestic terrorist organization, Antifa. That's our primary.
Okay, so he talked really fast. I got to back up. He's being asked about Antifa as if it's an enterprise. Antifa stands for anti-fascist, and I'm against fascism. fascism, beginning with Mussolini and then over to Hitler. And then we also have, of course, Franco in Spain. It goes on. And now we have, of course, there are others, but Donald Trump, fascist wannabe. He's trying to impose it here in the United States. Not for it, against it. Let's just be clear. Not going to give you a definition now. I just want to say, actually, why not? Why don't we just pull up? I mean, let me just pull something up here for a second. I think, let's see if I can get a good, let's go to Merriam-Webster and I will share that. Let's do that before I share. Let's remove Michael for a second. Let's make sure we're on the same page. You know that this show is really about making sure we have the numbers should we need them, and the definition. So we're kind of all on the same page. So let's look at this. This is Merriam-Webster dictionary, and this is the noun fascism. A populist political philosophy, movement, or regime, such as that of the fascisti, that exalts nation and often race above the individual, that is associated with centralized autocratic government headed by a dictatorial leader, and that is characterized by severe economic and social regimentation and by forcible suppression of opposition. We have an example from Jason Stanley, American professor who is now living in Canada. At the core, who also his family perished in the Holocaust, I believe, or some of them escaped Nazi Germany. At the core of fascism is loyalty to tribe, ethnic identity, religion, tradition, or, in a word, nation. And then Josh Jones said there are differences between Italian fascism, German Nazism, and their various nationalistic descendants. Okay. I feel like you know what we're talking about now. You might not have put it in those words, but that's exactly what you are likely thinking. So let's listen to, let me just say, so if I'm anti-fascism, that is part of what it means to be an American, to believe in democracy. Democracy is incompatible with fascism. Okay, got it. Okay, so the tension, of course, and the reason why the founders wanted the separation of powers between the Article 1 branch, which is the legislature, and Article 2, which is the executive powers through the presidency and the executive branches. And then Article 3 is the judiciary. The idea of these so-called checks and balances is that the recognition that, so to speak, quoting quoting this famous adage, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely, that we didn't want to have too much authority. We didn't want a king. And now we would say we don't want any kind of dictator, right? And that was the plan. And Donald Trump is trying to put forward this notion of the unitary executive. And by the way, that quote was from the British historian Lord Acton about absolute power corrupts absolutely. And this is something, obviously, Acton is post the U.S. Constitution, but the concept endures, right? And so we want the separation of powers. Donald Trump is pushing for this unitary executive theory. John Roberts is cheering him on, but it's not over. We don't have full fascism at all. We don't have full authoritarianism. And we see that with the legislature in Indiana. We see that with the grand jury saying no way. And now this guy here, this is, again, this FBI leader, Michael Glasheen, kind of mumbling and swallowing his words, talking or being asked about Antifa, because one of the things Donald Trump is trying to do, and we should be scared about this, is say that anyone maybe who goes to protests against the government or organizes things like No King's Day, that they're part of something they're calling Antifa. And he wants to make them a domestic terror organization. Now, think about this. The fishermen on the boats with cocaine in the Caribbean, they wanted to designate them narco-terrorists so they could just kill them extrajudicially. The idea that Donald Trump is trying to create or impose or invent some sort of RICO enterprise or some giant conspiracy among the various people who just don't like his regime is dangerous. And this is why when you listen to Michael Glasheen, what he says is laughable if it weren't so dangerous. So let's listen real carefully to what he says.
Executive Order Domestic Terrorist Organization, Antifa. That's our primary concern right now.
All right, that's what President.
So what he said is Donald Trump's executive order saying Antifa is a terrorist organization is our primary concern. Now let's see what Benny Thompson has to ask him in response.
Trump did. What did the FBI say?
We share the same view. When you look at the data right now, you look at the domestic terrorist threat that we're facing. Right now, what I see from my position is that's the most immediate violent threat that we're facing on the domestic side.
So where is Antifa headquartered?
What we're doing right now with the organization.
Where in the United States does Antifa exist? Yeah. If it's a terrorist organization and you've identified it as number one.
We are building out the infrastructure right now.
So what does that mean? We're trying to get the information. You say Antifa is a terrorist organization. Tell us as a committee, how did you come to that? Where do they exist? How many members do they have in the United States as of right now?
Well, that's very fluid. It's ongoing for us to understand that. The same, no different than Al Qaeda and ISIS.
No, I don't want you.
No different than Al Qaeda and ISIS. It's fluid. He doesn't want to say a number like at least 5 or at least whatever, because it would be a lie. Let's continue.
Ask one question, sir. I just want you to tell us. If you said Antifa is the number one domestic terrorist organization operating in the United States, I just need to know where they are, how many people. I don't want a name. I don't want anything like that. Just how many people have you identified?
I love
with
this
the
man.
FBI that Antifa is made of?
Well, the investigations are active.
So you wouldn't come to this committee and say something you can't prove. I know you wouldn't do that.
Oh my God.
But you did.
Whoa. Whoa. Congressman Thompson effing nailed it. When I grow up, I want to be as good as he is. That last line, guys. That should bring us into the weekend. But I can't leave you hanging like this. I have to do 2 scoops of Crazy Town. Okay, here we go. Let's play it, Jason. I'm loving the Crazy Town music. Okay. God. But, oh my God, AJ, by the way, you know AJ comes up with, or he shares with you a word of the day. It's in the chat before the show. We have a big community here. Our mods are amazing. I don't know what we would do without Deb and AJ and Jason. So please, a round of applause for them from your home. Okay, so remember I told you Donald Trump was having a really, really awful day? It carried over into some congressional party at the White House. And he's up there with his wife, Melania. And, I got to tell you, the guy he had esteem for, he was smiling at, Zohran Mandami. I mean, I think Donald Trump obviously hates women, And the woman I think he hates the most right now is his own wife. I'm smiling. It's not a nice thing to see a man express hatred for his wife, but just once, I would live for the moment that Melania would just crack open and on camera just say what she's thinking. But no, that's not the role she is in, and that's not what she's made of. But a girl can dream. So let's first play this first clip.
Well, I just heard about that for the first time. The only thing I can tell you, I know one thing for sure.
What he's saying he heard about for the first time is Melania apparently has some legislation that will help children in some way. I don't even care to tell you because I don't know about it. But it's something that she is putting forward. Let's just put it that way. I probably know about as much as Donald Trump does about it because let's listen.
Well, I just heard about that for the first time. The only thing I can tell you, I know one thing for sure, Mr. Speaker. It's going to be great. It's going to be great for children. Okay? I don't know what it is she's doing, but I know it's going to be great for children because she loves children and she's got a wonderful boy and
Do they never talk? His actual wife? Now, I know he knocked down the East Wing. So in fairness, she doesn't have an office near him anymore. And God knows they're not laying in the same bed talking at night. I mean, I shouldn't say that, but I mean, you know, like a normal couple laying in bed next to each other, everyone's staring at their iPhone. There's a moment then, or at dinner, or sometime where you might mention, hey, honey, you know the job you have, you know, being president, I have this legislation that I want introduced, and it may come across your desk. So could I tell you a little bit about it? That would be like a normal conversation. But clearly, no. But this next part, she loves children. And then he starts to say, she has a great son. This is not the only time when Donald has used that grammatical formulation. Not, we have a son. And you think even if he says she has a great son, he would then say, our son, Barron, or something. And by the way, there's no flipping way Barron is not Donald's son. He looks just like his father, Fred Sr. So whatever he's trying to do to distance himself from Barron in this is weirdo. Let's keep playing.
She's got a wonderful boy, and she's very proud of her boy. But she loves children, and if she puts it out, it'll be maybe unanimous again, or whatever that was, but very close, unanimous again. I want to thank you all. Have a great Christmas, a great Hanukkah, and a fantastic year. But we're going to have a great 3 years, 4 years, 10 years. We're going to make.
Okay. Now, that's insulting enough to her, distancing himself from their child, but he was uglier earlier. And this is what an utter pig this man is. And I cannot wait till he is out of our collective world, our minds, the planet. Let's go.
I went to the hospital and they actually thought he wasn't going to make it. His wife was devastated.
Okay. He's talking about the shooting of Steve Scalise. And I am not sure why he is talking about this. I get very confused. It happened in 2017. It was during his first presidency, right? We're talking almost 8.5 years ago. I don't know what brought this up, but listen up.
I went to the hospital and they actually thought he wasn't going to make it. His wife was devastated. She was crying. I tell the story. I found out that night you have a wife that loves you dearly. I know many wives would not even be crying.
Oh my God. Look at her face as they laugh. This is not the first time he has said this. but I have never seen it when she is standing there. This is his way of saying my wife doesn't really love me. Is it his way of saying she won't sleep with me? I don't know what's going on here, but I really wish in my dreams it would be the best thing that would happen if she walked over to the microphone and said, enough already. But she won't. Let's go.
But your wife was absolutely a mess. She was crying. She was inconsolable, Steve. So we found that out, but he made it. And then he went.
Here's what's getting me through the rest of this regime. As bad as it is to have Donald Trump as our president, and as much as we have to do to protect the victims of his selfish, dangerous, murderous, incurious, racist, sexist, malignant, narcissistic administration, we can at least thank the higher power that we are not married to Donald Trump.
Hello, prison mates. It's the Taub show where welcome everyone. Let's learn about what is happening in politics yesterday and today. There was hope, and we are together in this democracy we work for. And again, welcome to the Taub show.